Hello out there. All right, I'll switch with you. Um, it was like 17 years ago that, here, I'll trade mics with you. Here's a mic for you. 17 years ago that this film premiered in this theater. And we had all these gentlemen, of course, and we had a few others. Michael was still alive, Michael Thompson. And we had Reno here, and I think Eddie Rothman was here in the audience, wasn't he?
He was in Huntington.
Yeah. And the house was full, and it's funny though. To me, it felt like this. My name is Gregory Harrison, by the way. It felt like this really resonated again today. At least it certainly did with me, just as much as it did back then. So I actually did this job back then too, of just emceeing the Q&A at the end of it. So let me just do a couple questions, and then we'll take some questions from the audience. But I'm wondering, in the 17 years, all of you, each of you, I'd love to hear this answer. How do you feel about where professional surfing has gone now since the making of this movie? Anybody have any strong feelings they want to share? Ian, you have strong feelings about pretty much everything.
I'm just old and mellow, mate. No, actually, I was adamantly against this swimming pool surf contest. They're actually holding in the UAE in the middle of the desert. And Alyssa and I were up for hours watching it last night. And the wave was actually pretty darn good. It was better than Lemoore, and the format has changed. And the idea of there being, it was actually an exciting and interesting contest. And then we woke up this morning and they were doing it in the middle of the night with the lights on. So I think that's actually pretty cool. The fact that it displaced Sunset Beach, I'm not stoked on that. They should have Sunset, Haleiwa, and Pipe ending the tour. But, I think that the bottom line is that the surfers were stoked, and they had the same sort of passion as we had. And really, in the end, I think that the world tour is like a dream that lights up the lights of so many kids around the world. And so the aspiration, of all of these young kids that are dreaming to be pro surfers, I really think that's what the pro tour is, and it's the legacy that we leave.
It's a legacy. And do you all have a sense of pride about what we just saw, about having created in your imaginations the idea of a pro tour, and then using that drive and discipline to make it happen? Do you still have a sense of pride about it?
Well, our dream came true. I mean, we had this dream that we could be. I remember Ian and I going to the newsstand in Australia, and we bought the current tour magazine for Formula One racing and the World Championship Tennis Tour. And we looked in those magazines and went, we can do that. We looked at that and we said, that's what we should be. We should be going around the world and competing and making. We used to walk around, my friend Mike Perry and I, and go, $1 million. We can make $1 million. Well, they are making $1 million now. That's what's crazy. And the evolution of the sport, the women's rise in the last couple of years is just incredible from the point of view of how good they're surfing, and they're just as exciting. They're just as exciting as the men. These young girls, they're charging waves that we had to think twice about. you watch them. I happened, fortunately enough, to go to Tahiti for the Olympics, and most of you know, I spent some time in China starting the whole Olympic, and there was a little Chinese girl that made it to the Olympics. She was only 14. And to see her push over the ledge, chopu, and just go for it was freaking crazy, besides the men. I mean, the day that the waves were really good, and the one wave Medina got where he came out with his hand in the air.
The famous photo.
Maybe one of the most famous photos that'll ever happen in surfing. So our dream came true.
That's great. Ian, if there was a big wave tour right now, do you, when you were young, do you think you would have been on that, or would you have stuck with the general world tour?
A big wave tour?
If there was a big wave tour at that time, would you have preferred
Would
to
I
be
have
on
been
a
on a big wave tour? Yeah, absolutely. Although I must say that Jaws is pretty radical. The way those guys are pulling in the barrel on that wave.
Yeah.
Nazare is kind of crazy shit scary.
Mm-hmm.
And then also how cold at Mavericks. I mean, these waves that the guys are riding now are just really beyond comprehension.
Yeah.
That's sort of the advancement of surfing.
Right.
And every 10 years or so, there's a new generation of people that push the limits, and it's actually spectacular watching, particularly the guys pulling in the barrel at Jaws. That's amazing.
Extraordinary. Sean, how are you feeling about the evolution of surfing since this movie came out?
Well, I think have a lot of pride associated with where it's gone and where it's or where it's been and where it's come to. Certainly, we were there right in the beginning, and it was always our dream. How could we make a living from going surfing? So pro surfing was sort of the option that we chose, and but for some of us, it wasn't like the absolute focus. The focus was like, how much could we surf? And pro surfing was almost like secondary as a way to make income. But we all had this beautiful, pure love for surfing. And, there's certain people think that, if you make a living from going surfing, in some ways you prostituting or defiling this sacred art. But I think when you make a living from something, it even has more reverence, and it's even more important. And I mean, all of us, us guys have generally made a living from going surfing. What's been interesting that I've seen over the last few months is, a lot of people are familiar with some of these incredible brands that have gone bankrupt. You've seen it in the newspapers over the last couple of weeks, Quicksilver and Billabong and Volcom. And what's happened is that private equity and people who haven't been associated with surfing have seen surfing as a vehicle for profit. And that has defiled the experience. And consequently, a lot of these companies have gone out of business and really impacted the surfing industry. But to have that pure love, and we certainly all had that love, and we still have that pure love. I mean, maybe we don't go out there and paddle over the edge at Nazare or paddle over the edge at Chopu, but in our own way, if you even ride a 5 or 6 foot wave, that's paddling over the edge these days. So the feeling and the purity is there. And it was interesting to hear that one quote from the late Andy Irons. He's got a beautiful looking guy, and he's got this sort of vibrancy, and he says, "I've got the best job in the world." It was very cool to see that, and then to see the late Michael Thompson say, "I'll surf till I die." This is the connectivity that surfing creates between the heart and the soul, and the ocean.
I think the film really captured that as well. I think that love, that passion, that addiction, all of those elements that are involved in being a surfer. Jeremy, how did you? It's a wonderful job you did directing this film.
Thank you.
Just amazing. How did you capture? How did you, in your editing and your filming and direction, how did you capture something that it's very difficult to have told this story, because it's multifactional, and it travels across many years. So how did you get to all that?
Yeah, I mean, when I first approached Sean, I just started a company with my wife and my producing partner, Rob Trail at the time, and we really wanted to tell a story that, you know, really had, you know, kind of like the human experience. Like surfing is like the perfect example of life. You know, you have these triumphs and tragedy. Every single time you ride a wave, it's you you feel the top of the world, and then you wipe out, and it's like you feel like you're gonna die, and it's like this reverse of it. So when we approached it, it was really a collaborative element. Like myself being a surfer and wanting to get into like the details of like what board Sean was riding, and then Monica and Rob were really kind of grounding us in what was the story, what was the humanity of it, and how this you had this place where kids just wanted to achieve their dream, spend every day of their lives surfing because it's amazing, and then they came across this obstacle of obviously what this culture war with the Hawaiians, where the Hawaiians weren't quite getting what pro surfing could be, and it was just and then at the same time, you know, we were telling this story against this backdrop of, you know, I was at a point where, you know, we were started a company and we were all excited to be doing this amazing movie. And then, you know, the tragedy that happened with Sean's son, we felt like there was this element of, you know, there was hope again, you know, that Sean could find hope, and we were finding hope within this tragedy and telling the story and being part of this time period to make that happen.
That, you know, I think one of the aspects of this film that I love the most is that it so humanizes all of these icons, and it shows that there are the very human emotions in their everyday lives, and tragedies, and comebacks, and fears. I mean, you know, in with the shotgun, and rabbit in the bushes, and yeah, I mean, just so it so humanizes everybody, and I think that's what's most compelling about the film. We all knew you were great surfers. Will you update us, Sean, on MR and on rabbit and how they are?
Yeah, but just quickly, you know, Jeremy, you know, with Monica and Rob, this was the first film that ever documented the illegal overthrow of Hawaii by the United States. The first film to ever document it and to ever talk about the Hawaiian, you know, Renaissance. Yeah. And you know, I really think that Eddie Rothman was amazing star in this movie, and I think he really, and Clyde Aikau and Barry Kanai-Puni, they really gave a very articulate representation about the culture, and also the motivation about why they perceived what we had done wrong. Okay, my beef was a couple of years later, but also it was a result of an interview. So there was this cultural sensitivity that maybe we just didn't have at the time. You know, we wanted to be the best. We didn't realize we were hurting feelings. But ultimately, through this great hero, the problem was resolved through Eddie. And you know, why was Eddie so magnanimous? I'll tell you why. I remember Eddie coming to South Africa. We didn't cover it in the movie, but coming to South Africa in 1972 to segregated South Africa, and checking into a hotel, the Malibu Hotel on the beachfront, and they wouldn't let him stay in there because they considered him black. And my father and I went and picked him up, and he came and stayed with us. And I think, you know, even in the context of apartheid, he saw aloha, and then we introduced him to an Australian family who took him to Jeffreys Bay. And I think Eddie had this deep love for South Africans and Australians. And that's why he got Ian and PT and Bugs out of the issue, because he felt compelled to, because he had been given aloha at a bad time. So I mean, I'm very proud of the reflection of the movie, in that it wasn't like Hawaiian, black shorts bad, Aussies and South Africans good. It wasn't that way. I think Jeremy handled it with the bad Aussies. He handled it with a lot of with a very deft touch and a very warm and human touch. I think you did. It was amazing, Jeremy.
Thank you.
You know what? I want to butt in because I haven't seen it for a while, and again, it's a great movie, and you know it's got much more depth than I would have thought of, and that's a tribute to your work and your vision. You know, it's really really cool, and I'm glad that I spent 4 hours in traffic getting up here. But I do want to make another point here. Out in the audience is my wife. She spent 10 years on the tour at Alyssa Schwartzstein Cairns. And sitting next to her is Kim Merrig,
Yeah, world champ.
world champ from Santa Barbara, who came to watch
Hey,
as
Kim.
well. So the whole surfing family, you know, it just goes on and on.
Surfing is a family, that's for sure. I have a dear friend, Steve Walden, who's one of the great longboard shapers in the world, sitting right out here. And I go ahead, give him a round of applause. 60 years. 60 years he's been shaping. And can you update us, Sean, on Rabbit and MR?
Yes, MR posted. He told me he posted the movie. MR's got a big following on Instagram, like 135,000 people. He posted the movie yesterday. He was so stoked to post the movie. Rabbit's son Jagger. Rabbit. You could see Rabbit wanted to be a rock star. He named his son Jagger. How about that? His son actually has been doing a little bit badly. He has this, and they've had a GoFundMe about Rabbit's son has been in hospital, but I think he's about to be released. But still, both of them are still stoked. They love the movie. I was in Australia last year, and we showed the movie, and it was amazing. We showed it in 4 different locations, and every time we had this one theater had over 1,000 people and 500. It was just packed, and people love the period. I think even young guys and girls who weren't part of it, can recognize the soul and can recognize the love and can recognize the purity of that period. And yes, people think, professional surfing, but there is a beautiful purity to that period and to what we created and creating this sport that served us. Pro surfing served us. It enabled us to just surf more. And our whole focus wasn't just on being a world champion. Our focus was on being the best surfer, getting the best waves, having the best time. So pro surfing has been great to all 3 of us.
Okay, I'm gonna take it to the audience, but I want one last question I wanted to ask. Do you think that surfing would be as crowded today if there wasn't professional surfing? Or do you think it contributed, or do you think that was inevitable anyway?
No, the world is crowded.
The world is crowded.
And if it's a crowded world, what's the best thing to do is to go surfing.
I agree.
And that's the truth.
Yeah.
And so, of course, we live near the coast. People are going to go surfing. And it would be, California, of course, is enormously crowded. And I don't think pro surfing impacts that. I think it's just the magical nature of going to the ocean.
Of surfing, I agree.
Blaming pro surfing is like blaming Jerry Lopez.
I wouldn't do that. Who's got a question out there? I see a hand go up over there. Yes. Can you come up here? I'll let you say it into the mic.
Thanks for staying, everyone. That's cool.
I'd like to ask about the cinematography and the filming. There was a mention of a Super 8, but those were not handheld shots. You were shooting inside the wave. And I know there were some professional photographers, but it's just beautiful cinematography.
Yeah, we were really lucky that, this time period was captured beautifully by a bunch of filmmakers at the time, Bill Delaney, Greg Capo, Miguel Vray, Dan Merkel. Everyone was shooting on 16 millimeter, Super 16. So, as far as what we saw in the film, obviously, in our production, we didn't capture any of that. We were just blessed with the amount of people that were shooting film at the time. And luckily that a lot of that still existed. I mean, we were digging through, getting a, 35 millimeter, 16 millimeter film in the mail. We were, Bill Delaney at the time was going through his film Free Ride and recapturing it. So we just went through a lot of film and was able to restore some of it, transfer a bunch of it. And then as far as the filming of the interviews, we really made a point of trying to, obviously, like when you see a rabbit, there's an open door behind them. When we started the interview, it was a little bit closed. And we just tried to really capture the essence of each person that we were doing an interview with. Kanga was kind of in a dusty kind of backyard that kind of represented Western Australia a little bit subliminally, and so we try to approach it like that as far as the filmmaking. But we were really blessed by everyone that shot Super 16 back in the 70s.
Anybody else? Any other questions? Yes.
I don't remember at the time. I was probably in high school when you guys had the controversial period with the blowback from the Hawaiians, and then you had that court meeting. Was there any time, did you officially walk back your comments in Surfer or Surfing Magazine on your date apology that way? Was that something that you guys thought about doing to make?
He's asking if, for those in the back, if anybody didn't hear him, he's asking about the articles that were written that from Australia that were bragging about being #1, and when they got into that meeting, he wants to know, did they walk back any of those things that they had written or said?
No, that's not actually what I asked.
Oh,
I asked if you publicly walked it back. If it was published,
a public walk back in print, maybe.
Exactly.
Okay.
My hero was Duke Kahanamoku. I won the most emerging junior surfer at the Australian Championships. It was the Duke Trophy. My dream was, Duke had unfortunately died, was to get in and perhaps even win the Duke contest, which you saw in the movie I did. My dream was to go to Hawaii, and Duke Kahanamoku in about 1915 brought surfing to Australia. And Snowy McAllister, an old Australian surfer, showed me where it was. He was there on that day. So my love and respect for Hawaiian surfing was all about Duke Kahanamoku. So I could not have been more respectful and more stoked to actually go and actually return the gift that Duke had brought to us in Australia of an Australian going and winning the Duke contest. That's how I saw it. So I don't believe I have anything to apologize for, and I never will. And what we did, and whenever I've spoken to an Hawaiian and mentioned my story, they all go, oh, okay, you are respectful of Duke Kahanamoku just like we are. And everything goes away.
All right. Yes, you. Come on up here and ask it so everybody can hear it.
Just to pass the torch on to all the youngsters, could each of you describe perhaps one of the most memorable waves you've had in your entire life or your favorite surfboard? And I'd just also like to thank Roger Nance and Chris Keat for having the Rincon Classic this weekend.
Yeah, it's on tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
I drove by it. It's looking kind of messy. Yeah.
Sean, favorite wave?
Oh, yeah. So my favorite wave was, how about this? I'm at Jeffreys Bay, 6 to 8 feet. I'm the only guy there. I'm the only guy paddling out at like 6:30 in the morning as the sun's coming up because we're on the East Coast, so the sun's boiling up through the ocean. And I get a 20 wave set coming towards me. And I don't know which wave to take off on. And about halfway through the set, there's about 100 dolphins heading towards me in this wave. They have massive, massive schools of dolphin at J-Bay. So I swing around. I'm going to take this wave with the dolphins, and I take off and I start riding this wave with dolphins everywhere. As I do a bottom turn, they're under me. They're on the side of my boards. They're in the wave. As I do a bottom turn, the dolphins do a bottom turn. As I do a top turn, they do a top turn, and the sun is just right there. And I pull into the inside section. They call it Impossibles, which is a sort of fastest, heaviest, hollowest section of the wave. They called it Impossibles because when we first started riding it, it was very difficult to make. And it starts sucking dry, and I'm right back in the barrel. I'm about 20 feet back in the barrel, and all the dolphins have disappeared. And I'm riding through this barrel, and right through the barrel, I can see that sunrise. And as I'm about to come out, two dolphins jump out of the wave, and they fly by my face. They're about 2 feet away from two of them, right through the tube. And it's like happening in slow motion, and then I get blasted out with a spit. And that connectivity with the ocean and the dolphins and the sunrise, it lives in my mind, and it's just beautiful.
Wow. Well, you always said that you've always said that tube riding is slow motion. Anyway, that's always been your perspective of it. PT, what's your favorite wave?
Well, favorite wave, I'd have to go to home. I grew up in an area called the Gold Coast, which most of you know today. The bottom end of the Gold Coast is called Coolangatta, where the Superbank is. But when I grew up, there was three distinct breaks. It was Snapper Rocks, Greenmount Point, and Kura. And I grew up surfing Kura. And Kura's a sand point that's known to be very hollow, and you've all seen the films and the photos. And I can't remember any specific day, but I do remember one thing, is we used to be able to surf it before we went to school, and there'd only be 2 or 3 of us out. That's the one thing I do remember. That's not like that today, because if you've been fortunate to go to the Superbank, there's 200 people out when the sun comes up. So from that point of view, those memories of surfing Kura in the late 60s, and particularly in the early 70s, when I got to meet Jerry Lopez in Australia. And, I'd seen him in the magazines and all this stuff, and I was a brash young little kid. I walked up to him at the Noosa contest and introduced myself, and at that point, we were still learning how to tube ride. It was tube nearlies in those days. We really, and the boards weren't allowing us to get barreled like we do today. And I walked up to Lopez and I said, how do you keep coming out of those barrels? And he said to me, you're one of those young kids that surfs Kura, right? You and that Michael Peterson guy. And I go, yeah, that's our spot. And I said, but we keep having trouble if we keep getting in the barrel and then we slip down and the lip rips our head off. And he said to me, here's a little piece of advice, a little tip. He said, Kura's pretty hollow, right? It's like a drain pipe. It's like really round. And I said, yeah. He says, so, and if you look at the films of me and photos, he said, take your leading hand and stick it in the middle of the drain pipe. And I went back to Kura and started doing that. I started coming out of the barrels. Thanks, Jerry.
Ian?
Yeah, I grew up in Margaret River in Western Australia. You'll see it on the world tour. But back in my day, I had to ask people to come surfing with me. So I would be out there surfing all the time. And many times, the pod of dolphins that Sean had been surfing with had swum across the Indian Ocean to my break. And I would surf with them. And one day in particular, it was about 10 or 12 feet at Margaret River, big. And this pod of dolphins comes out there, and I'm paddling for a wave, and they would come in the wave, up in the wave, and stop me from taking off. And they would not let me surf with them, so I had to actually watch these dolphins ride and then flick out. And then they were gone, and I was able to surf again. I think the magic, Sean, is that in our youth, We grew up in places where you could go surfing by yourself amongst nature when nature was not ruined, and where there was sea life in the shore break, and when it was just so magical to be in the ocean. And those are the my memories. And so a few years ago, most of us are married, and you know that your wife is going to talk endlessly. I said to Alyssa, "Hey, how about we sell the house and move to Western Australia?" And the answer was no. Like the shortest conversation we've ever had. The waves are too big, they're all on reefs, and there's tons of sharks. And I just went, yeah, exactly. It's awesome. So it's Western Australia is still a magical place, and I love watching that event.
Wow, great. Jeremy, you're a surfer too, so tell us, what's your favorite wave? Don't leave you out.
Thanks. I was thinking about this. I think it's ways that you get to share with your friends. I wouldn't put anything specific. I have a couple of my friends that I started surfing with here tonight, and just that feeling of getting a great wave. Or actually, I do remember a wave. A little hurricane swell had come up to Malibu, and I was out with my friend Nick, and had this amazing little left, and he was paddling out, and I was able to turn really hard and spray him really hard right in his face, and that was an amazing wave.
All right, well, I'll just share mine real fast. A place called Uluwatu in Bali, and 1981. I go there with my wife Randy, who's sitting out here, and I paddle out. That was back then. You had to do a hike of about a mile to get to the cliffs, and I get down through the cliffs and somehow get out there. And it's not a huge day, but it was fun waves, 4 or 5 feet. And as I'm paddling out, and it's a long paddle, I see somebody take off way outside on the outer reef, and I recognize the style, and it's what I always thought of as the Baryshnikov of surfing, a guy named Sean Thompson. And I'm going, oh my God, that's Sean Thompson. He's my hero. Oh my God. And I'm paddling and paddling and paddling, and he gets another wave, and I'm seeing it, and I'm getting closer. And I finally get to about 50, 60 feet away, and I'm paddling up, and I see him, and he's just sitting on his board at that point. And I see him, and I'm thinking, okay, how am I going to break the ice? What am I going to say to him? And he turns and he looks at my direction as I'm paddling up to him, and he gets this look on his face, and he goes, hey, I know you. You're Gregory Harrison. I was starring in like the #1 show, Trapper John MD in the U.S. at the time, and he broke the ice, and that we surfed for a couple hours, and then I brought him in and took him to the hotel that I was staying at with Randy, and said, Sean's moving in with us in Carpinteria at our house, and he's bringing his
That's how we came to Santa Barbara.
and he's bringing his whole family. So that was my favorite wave ever. How long do we have here? It's what is it, 4:14? Are we do we have a time limit?
Yeah, no, I think we've got a few more minutes, but just before, I just want to say one thing, which is not directly connected with the movie, but it is connected with the movie. So over the last since the movie came out in 2008, what I do now is I do a lot of they're called keynotes. I speak at large corporations, schools, universities. Every time I do a paid event for a large company like Google or Cisco or GM, I'll do a free one for school. I've done many here in Santa Barbara and right around the world. But all my talks are based on something called a Surface Code, which is a little card that I developed about 20 years ago. And it was resulted from Surfrider Foundation. Surfrider Foundation was one of the environmental groups out in the front today. And Glenn Henning said Rincon was facing a severe environmental challenge, and it was a $7 million problem. And he said, I'd like to give you $100 budget to help solve the problem. This is Glenn Henning. I'm going, you crazy. So I wrote this little card and printed the cards up. It cost me $100, 100 kids. 100 kids came down the beach, and we had the water board, and we had different government bodies come down, and ultimately through Hillary House and Heal the Ocean, which is one of the groups out there today, they raised a bond and ultimately got everyone connected up to the sewer line. So I want to tell you that surfing and environmentalism has really changed my life, because now these cards have evolved, and now I get hundreds of thousands of people around the world to write their own code. So it's a great way in our broken, turbulent world to bring people together through the value of surfers code. So I know we're a bit off the subject here, but I would love you guys, just go to my website, SeanThompson.com. You download this little worksheet and you write your own code. 15-minute exercise, 12 lines. Every line begins with I will. And millions of people around the world are doing it, and they share their codes. When I go to prisons, when I go to rehab clinics, people write their code and they share it. And it creates this unity, because the world is so stuffed up right now and so broken. And there's so many issues with Republicans on this side of the fence, Democrats on this side of the fence. The code can bring people together through the values of surfing. So I just wanted to say that surfing is a wonderful thing. And I'm stoked that I got my mates here. These are two of my best mates in the whole world. We've been through tough times, but surfing has always enabled us to give us the stoke to pedal back out again. So thanks, my brothers.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, I think Sean has used metaphors of surfing to give more help to people in the world than any other surfer ever prior, and is continuing to do that amazing work. You're on your third book now? Yeah, third book now. I recommend reading any or all of them, and do your own list for I Will, because he's made me do it too, and it's helped. All right, any more questions? Yes, sir.
My name is Nathan Pratt, and I was in high school when these guys.
Horizons West, yeah.
Yes, I was a part of a group of young surfers that started a skateboard team called the Z Boys back in that day, and we had a movie come out about us a few years before this movie came out. And my question to you guys is, you know, the experience I've had having a movie out and sharing a story about what you did at the time has been just the most amazing experience. So I want to find out from you guys, you know, when you go to see kids and they meet you and they're, you know, someone's that you know, suddenly one day they go, oh, you know, I know a Z-boy, and you've been discovered, right? Because you may know people that know nothing about your surfing background and you had an adult life and all that. So I want to know, my question to you is, what's been the best thing to come out of having this movie out in the universe and in the world for each of you individually?
Thank you.
It's cathartic to be able to get these emotions out. You know, I don't have my feelings about Hawaii are that it's an amazing place and the people are incredible, and so I have no negative feelings at all. But I do have a few friends. I do a stand-up paddle retreat with veterans, and we've done about 5 or 6 of them. And these are guys with the PTSD that have come out of, you know, whether they're Navy SEALs, you know, just soldiers, Marines, and stuff like that. And many of them have never surfed. And we're able to get them out in the water, and within a couple of days, they're actually catching waves. And it's really a spectacular experience. And some of them have watched this movie. In fact, a couple, when I did a post on LinkedIn, and a couple of them commented how, you know, retired Navy captain and things like this. That is really one of the most amazing experiences. In fact, you know, our last trip, Alyssa came down and we sat after dinner with one of the Navy SEALs that was in the Captain Phillips thing. And he was also on the Bin Laden mission. And just absolutely extraordinary people who appreciate what we can teach them about getting in the ocean. I mean, you imagine that you can teach a Navy SEAL something about the ocean and the waves. Well, you know, I've got some of the most amazing friends now from that community, because the gift that we can give them is this new thing, which is how to ride a wave and to how to be in the ocean. And now we're connected, into that community, and they're just, spectacular people. So that's one of the things that in, my later time has been super important for me, because this gift that we've been given, how can you give that back to someone? That's amazing.
Well, it seems to me, if I remember, that's your history with PT is that you both coached NSSA for years and years, right?
Well, yeah, we when we first came to America, which we both started coming here. Well, we were here in '72, but we pretty much ended up in Huntington Beach at the end of the '70s. We actually opened a Bronze Daisy surf shop with Chuck Tent on Main Street, which was an adventure. But at the same time, NSSA had come along, and what we had done with the Bronze Daisies was we were nurturing future competitors like Shane Aran and Jim Banks. And so we were passing our knowledge along. And I think what really is important from this film that what Jeremy did and Sean is that it tells the story of the dream, like I said earlier, that's led to places like I get a laugh out of Ian and Alyssa are up last night watching the wave pool event in Abu Dhabi. That none of that stuff would be happening, and we're all worried about the crowds. But let me tell you, the more of those wave pools they build, the better. To me, that's just another surf spot, and you go to whatever surf spot you've never been to before, right? And you go, well, I got to check the lineup. I got to know where to sit. I got to do. It's no different for that now, and the generation that's going to come from that there's going to be wave pools everywhere. Right now in America, there's 10 under construction, like seriously, and there's 40 in the world. And that's all been driven, in my opinion, by exposure of the Olympic movement. And now we have gold medal champions in the Olympics for surfing. And so the culture is growing rapidly. I mean, they just opened that pool in Munich, and 25,000 people turned up on opening day.
Really?
Right. And that just tells you all of those people are being exposed to our culture. And our culture, to me, signifies freedom, the freedom to go ride a wave. Like I said in the movie, you always think you're going to get a better one. And once you get addicted to that, it's addictive. You got to think, I'm going to try and get a better one as long as I can, like Michael said, till I die.
Yeah. Speaking of wave pools, I did a movie 37 years ago.
Iconic movie. We showed it here with like 25. It was full. The full house here.
It was full. Everybody
like
knew
a few
every
months
line.
ago.
Called North Shore, and I played Chandler, who hated contests.
The Shaper.
The Shaper. But the most absurd thing about that movie, and I think it captured Aloha spirit. It captured a lot of accurate information and reflected Hawaiian culture really nicely. It did, but there was one silly thing about it, and that was that this kid learns to surf in a wave pool and comes to Hawaii, and that was pretty absurd, except that now I have actually met people who have only ever surfed in wave pools. There was a guy who helped construct the Lemoore wave pool, and I went up there for a contest and met him and sat there with him watching the contest, and he was pretty good, but he said, I've never surfed the ocean. And he lives right there out in the middle of the farmland. He says, I've only surfed here. So it is possible. So, technology is catching us up to the plot of North Shore. Sean, you want to answer that question?
Nathan, so I thought that was a really good question. So maybe it's not directly connected to the movie, but pro surfers I think have a tremendous influence on young people and also on dads as well. I'm in Wollongong. We're showing Bustin down the door in Wollongong, Australia, which is like a steel mining town, similar to where Mark Richards lives, Newcastle, but they've got big iron ore smelters there and mines. And we're showing the movie. There's about 600 people, and a guy walks up to me, says, hey, Sean, my name's Sean. My dad named me after you. And I went, wow, how cool is that? And 5 minutes later, another guy walks up to me and goes, hey, my name's Sean. My mom named me after you. And I went, wow, that is so cool that, just through our surfing experience, some kid or some dad or some mom has admired it, and they don't know you as a person, but through your surfing, they know what you represent. They know the values. Surfing teaches you about values, commitment, perseverance, resilience, creativity. I mean, all the positive things about life surfing can teach you. And you're out there surfing, and then someone has responded to that, and then they've named their child after you. So for me, that is maybe the greatest honor.
Nice. You want to continue? I mean, we. I'm just concerned that they often turn these theaters over. I don't know when the next gig is. You got one more question? How about that?
Yeah, great, great.
So it's a little bit more of a comment. I'm Sally. Hi, Sean.
Yeah, we surf with you at Rincon all the time.
So I want to thank you too. Similar to what he said, I lived in on the North Shore at that time. So I played volleyball with Eddie, and I know who Fast Eddie is. So it really brought back some memories, and actually made me realize some of the tension that I didn't understand there when I first landed. I landed right in the middle of that. So thank you for doing this. And I also want to tell you another way that you affected by what he says is that I teach. I've done a couple of study abroad programs where we do surfing, and the assignment at the end was to watch both Bustin' Down the Door and Endless Summer, and to compare and contrast, and the difference or the similarities in the culture, et cetera. And it was really interesting before AI, at least, because now they can just go on and find answers, but to have them actually think about that. And this movie, unfortunately, a lot of them had never heard of it. Most of them are beginning surfers. So it turned them on to this and that whole era. And then, of course, Endless Summer is just timeless. So thank you. You provided me with a great assignment for my classes. And I really do appreciate the walk down memory lane, too.
All right. Well, I think we can put a period on the end of this. Thank you everybody,
everyone.
for
We're
coming.
So stoked. We're so
we're
stoked. Thank you very
Stoked
much.
to be here in Santa Barbara.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.